in, a vulnerable shape, and you have to get, organized to get your weak side fullback tucked in, or pressure on the ball, or just delay. You don't have to win, forcing it into a wide area, letting numbers get back. So organizing those chaotic transition moments become really important. But also you can, at different times, our whole job hinges on scanning, our entire job, whether it's in possession or out of possession, right? So there are different times within a match where the ball might be, in the middle third or in your defensive third, that you can just take a glance and quickly organize. You can just take a glance and remind your weak side fullback body shape, right? Like body shape as a weak side fullback is so important, so that you can see the runner, so that you can attack the ball. So just little different moments like that, I think, are going to be incredibly important. And I think for anybody listening who either says that their goalkeeper needs to be better at communication, or the goalkeeper themselves have been told, I need to be better at communication, you have to have patience with this, right? Because all communication stems upon game understanding. What am I looking for? And what's the most important things that I need to be looking for and say? And that comes with experience, and that comes with education. So if you're looking at a goalkeeper and you're telling them they need to be better at communication, your feedback needs to be way more descriptive, and you need to be behind them, helping them to see what that important information is and how to say it.
And I think communication is huge in this. Not all those goals are a shot prevention moment. Like Jill said, like the big principle is prevent when I can, react when I must, but you're not always going to get that chance to be preventative. So I think goal 5 and goal 7 were moments where potentially Nair could be preventative, but it's not always going to be the case. And if the decision is to set and react, then that might be the best decision to save it. I think some small nuances when we talk about preventing are, what is my starting position vertically? Jill did mention that, but I think that a lot of the goalkeepers that are successful in using their smother, coming out, putting on early pressure, are mindful of their higher vertical positioning, staying connected to your back line to maybe even limit opponents' want or look to go behind the back line because they see you there, or maybe they've tried it once and you've come out and you've cleared it. So, coming out and staying connected can help you prevent it, but also it can help you in the moments where maybe Barbara Banda does break through and comes in, and then, you're facing that. And obviously it's got its own nuances that are difficult too. Like, what forward are you playing against? Are they super crafty, or are they super fast? Yeah. Are there options for them to pass around you? These are all things that goalkeepers are going to need to consider when attempting to be or trying to be preventative. And I think that those are, for me, like 2 of the smaller nuances that an audience might be able to try to pick up on if they're looking for it.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder, it's probably something that I overanalyze and think too much of, but I always think of those moments where a keeper makes a big save, and we've all seen it where the keeper's like left on the island after that save, like the keeper knows they just change the scoreline effectively, and no one says anything to him. But those moments for me are kind of a red flag of oh, is the collaborative aspect there for them, or are they kind of on their own individual islands? Because Jill, you mentioned the game understanding when it comes to communication. I think you're absolutely right, but there is, not that you disagree with this, I don't think, but there is that social side as well. Are we able to collaborate? Are we able to work together? If it's you might actually
are you listening?
Yeah, are you listening? Right? Yeah, or
are you listening? I'm sorry, because a lot of times with my keeper, I'd be like, did you communicate? What was your conversation? And it comes down to, I said, whether it was their body positioning or where to push, and the person, and they don't react either. So a lot goes on the defense too here. Yeah, and a lot of this, even with the Chicago, you have to look back and watching that game, there was some stuff that Nair can't do anything about. We could get super, super technical, but she was left to her own devices often. And, I'm more worried that Chicago's got a very high hill to climb right now, just organizationally and defensively. And part of that is, oh, poor Nair. You know what I mean? Because we saw it this weekend.
Yeah, that farewell tour really came and went pretty quick. Now she's
I know.
Yeah.
Who said? I think Merit Messiah said it. Did you hear? She was just like, I would have put my 2 weeks notice in. I think that's what it was. I was like, oh man, you got to feel for her. I think rolling into my question though, because we're just kind of hitting on it, was seeing what do you guys think about some of the positioning or bad positioning that led to goals this weekend as well? Because I thought Silkowitz really struggled. I thought she was questioning her positioning during the game that I was questioning her positioning. I thought she looked incredibly uncomfortable to me at times in the goal. And then I'll go even back to the goal. Look, it's Banda. It was a banger, but I think Nair's positioning was off. I think she was too far off her line from that. What are you looking at me like that for? Am I being that picky? I mean, look, it's Barbara Banda, but I think she was too far. Not that I'm saying she would get it, but I think, if she's a yard back, that's a 30-yard strike. Like there was no reason to be, in my opinion, that far off your line. Banda wasn't going to slot it to anybody that you need to come and play the angle and stuff. So I think there were a couple goals this weekend where positionally the goalkeepers were very off, in my opinion.
I think
it's a big sigh out of Jill.
No, because I know that everyone probably gets tired of me saying it all goes back to the mental. But I think based on the way that we understand learning, there's 3 things that are interacting with each other for the goalkeeper to be able to see and act accordingly. So their capabilities, what's happening in the environment, and what task are they being asked to do. And sometimes we have to consider that the environment is affording different opportunities or impacting them in different ways, right? So the environment, Jordan Silkowitz's first NWSL match, nerves are high, never experienced that level of pressure before. I'm going to do things that are safe. And what's safe? What's our biggest safety blanket? Being stuck to the near post. That is our biggest safety blanket, because we know if we get beat there, then we look dumb, right? Typically, not always. I don't subscribe to that. You can't get scored on in the near post thing, but it is a safety blanket that a lot of goalkeepers just tend to gravitate right to, right? And it makes our job a lot harder because it makes it easier for the attacker to pick their spot and make them more decisive. And also it makes it obviously a larger area for us to cover. So I don't necessarily think that's something that we would typically see from her, but I think we see it because of the anxiety and the dealing with pressure. And yeah, I'm excited to get into that because that has more to do with my question.
Yeah. So, I mean, because that was it for me, like what I noticed, not consistently, but some of the goal, what it came back into my notes on goals was, because I'm negative Nancy. It was just it was positioning. But I agree with you with Jordan. It was her first game, had never, played in an NWSL game, and that has you have to take that into account. But then I look at like Katie Lunn, who was playing, I thought had a good position on the near post, and then just her again, her shot stopping on her ability to parry that ball properly, going to another whole thing, but putting it right back onto the top of the 6. And if you look at her positionally, I thought she was okay, but then her final action wasn't. And her final action was negative. And so then you're a negative trying to parry the ball, and parry ball drops to the top of the 6 and you get, banged into the back of the net. So, but my consistent theme was positionally, I think it's the first game. I know.
Well, I will say, I think it's a positive that Silkowitz has the, I guess, excuse of like, hey, first game. Whereas I think some of the stuff with Nair, it's like, it's not first game, like there's nothing like there to bail her out in that sense. Obviously, it's a different game. But I think the thing I usually go to on this sort of stuff is like, why are they in that position? And so again, Silkowitz has kind of like, well, he's going to be like a little bit nervy in the game, which makes sense. But some of it, going back to last week, Jill, I just think like, man, have y'all been training in like a 15 by 15 yard space for like the last 2 months? Like, is that like you haven't done any sort of spatial stuff at all? Like, I'm not saying that y'all need to go, practice, a long ball coming out and you're diving and heading it away for that 1 in a million. Like, you don't need to do everything. Like, you just can't cover that. But you should have been prepped for this moment a little bit better is kind of the thought I'm usually left with. So on some of it, the younger players, I give a bit of a pass on that. And early season, I understand, but some of those older players, like that's the thing. Like, like why is this still happening? But again, that's obviously stuff that I'm going to be thinking about that I can't really weigh in because I'm not there for those practices. But that's definitely where my mind goes on that sort of question.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to interject what we posted on our social media yesterday, which I knew we were going to get some pushback on, but I am so curious as to what would happen if we stopped hitting volleys at goalkeepers. What would happen? Would they be more inclined to be in a better position more often, right? Because let's just say I was on an angle. If I stood there with a ball in my hands and volley, there's no nuance to that. You're setting based on my body, right? But like in a game, if the ball's on my left foot or ball's on my right foot, you would set different, and your body shape might your body shape might be different, right? And my ability off of the ground, I can bend it. I can bend it around you. I can add deception.
Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more. Welcome back to another episode of the Keeper Institute podcast. The sun is shining. It's getting a little warmer. It's early March. We're ready to rumble and talk goalkeeping.
You always make me smile. Every time I get on here, I feel like such a goofball. I think that's the best way to start it, right? Yeah. Oh, you're sweet.
Our friendship.
All right. Well, we've done the air horn. We are excited. And I think we should just dive right into this. We should just catch our listeners off guard. Just go right for it.
We're not going to talk about anything except for this topic today. That's probably a lie. But let's do it. Jill.
All right. Well, yeah, I think this is a two-part podcast, kind of, right? So a couple weeks ago, we talked about the biggest problems with modern day goalkeepers, right? And we kind of reframed it as like, they're not the problem, but we're the problem as coaches, right? So it was an educational podcast. If you haven't listened to that one, probably go listen to that one first, because you're going to feel like, wow, as a goalkeeper, like I can breathe. And as a coach, we've got some major reflection on how we can design better sessions to help develop these goalkeepers that they have identified as lacking certain capabilities, right?
Right.
So I think today this is going to be a great follow-up podcast for the goalkeepers to talk about how to become a more well-rounded goalkeeper, because you are who you are right now. And if you have the desire to become a more competent goalkeeper rather than just a shot stopper, because I think that's the foundation of a good goalkeeper and somewhere we've evolved from, right? Like, think back to the old days, like we had a bunch of physical, athletic goalkeepers, big, strong goalkeepers who were just really good shot stoppers, right? And then we've evolved to maybe understand the game a bit more. And now we've evolved to add some more in possession, and the demands of the goalkeeper continue to just amass, right? And if we don't stay current with it, and if we don't continue to plan for those solutions that are then going to be, our problems in the future, we're going to be behind the eight ball. So let's just start this conversation now and let's get after it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Without any hesitation, baby. Number one, you want to be more well-rounded, tongue twister, then let's work on solving pressure. Solving pressure in possession, might be one of my favorite things to do in training. I think it's exhausting as a coach. Sometimes it's exhausting as the goalkeeper, but this is what's going to mimic the game, and it's really, really, really help you as you kind of turn into asking for the ball more. Builds confidence to know that you can get it back, know that you can get out of things with both your left and your right foot. I think having the ability to solve pressure is something that can really amplify your game.
Well, I think it starts towards everybody, I think, is pretty aware that they want to be more comfortable in possession. I think that's coaches want that, goalkeeper coaches want that, players want that. And I think the biggest misconception and hurdle to developing that part of your game is that players / coaches think it's about what you do on the ball. And I actually want to challenge that, because you don't have to have the flair of Messi or the technical capabilities of Messi. You just need to have a few foundational pieces of your in possession that will help you solve pressure. I truly believe that this is the low hanging fruit of all three of our elements today. 3 ways you could be more well-rounded. This is the easiest one, because it just stems from seeing and looking. And we know we have to look and we have to see what's happening in front of us, but we don't really know what to look for. And I think once we become more aware of what it is that we're actually looking for, what are we scanning for, what information is pertinent to me in this problem, I think it becomes so much easier. And so for goalkeepers, you're looking for 3 things, really simply. Pressure. Where's the pressure coming from? Where's the primary pressure coming from? Is there secondary pressure? Where's the space? And then where are my options? So when the ball's coming back to you, if we're scanning for those 3 things, we can solve any problem, any single problem. And the more you experience it, the more you will become familiar with the same problems over and over and over, right? Maybe the variables are going to be a little bit different, but I'm getting the ball back. I'm being pressed from one side. There's space on the other. And then we can use 3 different ways to solve that pressure that we talk about at TKI. MAT, M-A-T, easy to remember. MAT, move, as, touch, right? I can move into space. So whether that's backpedaling or changing my horizontal angle of support, move. I can ask for the ball into space, so I can retain my ability to defend the goal while asking for the ball into space, which will be further away from pressure and potentially set me up for the ability to play on one touch. And then I could touch into space. So using MAT is going to be your best friend, and which technique you use will be informed by what you see. The more you start to intentionally enter your training session with the thought process of, today I'm scanning and this is what I'm scanning for, I'm going to be really deliberate about looking for these things. Over time, you're going to feel so much more comfortable on the ball.
Yeah, couldn't agree. Everyone wants to know, how can I get more confident in possession? And like, let's go to a session I ran a couple weeks ago. It was our first session with a club that we work with. I wanted them to come up with their expectations. And then from there, I wanted them to each kind of list something that they're hoping to improve on from now, March, to June, when we're like done with that spring session. And every single one of them said confidence in possession. Everyone goes, oh yeah, me too. So it's that thing that everyone's like, I want this, but how do I get this? Mm-hmm. And I think that those are really simple principles that you can start to play in. If you're a coach, work them into your session. If you're a player, push yourself to try that.
Well, also, Tori, I think we have to acknowledge too, for the goalkeepers, is like, I did say this is the low hanging fruit, and I think the easiest one to implement, but I want to remind you as goalkeepers that this isn't something that you can change overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take bravery. It's going to take resilience. And if you focus more of your energy on being brave and resilient and determined to figure this out, you will eventually get better at it, and you will feel more comfortable and you will feel more confident. And we talked about this yesterday. I thought it was really cool after our training session tour, is we working with a couple players, and what struck me about them and was really fun to be part of. Like, I was getting emotional and like a little teary about it, but like,
I liked about you.
Yeah, to see them grow is just, it's contributed to their bravery and resilience, because once they were like, oh, this is really hard for me, and they were brave to try and stretch themselves and make mistakes, and then over time they became more competent and confident, and that confidence rolled into, well, what else can I do? Mm-hmm. What else can I work on to become more comfortable in the game, whether it's in possession or out, right? And it all stems back to their character. And I know, like, for us, that's probably the most important foundation of who you are as a goalkeeper. So simply by putting more effort into being brave and resilient, you're going to get better at solving pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. And I'm just going to give one last little side note, and then we'll move on to number 2. But this doesn't come without quote unquote failure, right? We learn from saves, we learn from failures. If you're a coach listening, there has to be psychological safety. They have to know that if they make this mistake, even if it's in a game, you're not going to holler at them. You're going to support them and say, like, maybe what could you have done differently? Or what did you see? Or what did you feel? And help them work through it, rather than like, why'd you let that in? You gave up the ball in the 6. They're not going to do it again. Right? We want to stay away from that. And then as a player, you have to know, okay, I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm not going to let that deter me from trying again.
Yeah. And one more tidbit for parents too. If you see this in games, I encourage you and I challenge you to identify it with your goalkeeper after the game, right? I was listening to some parenting study that was done, and they had two groups. They had one group of students that the parents praised. Oh, look how smart you are. You did great on this test. Like, look what you were able to do. X, Y, and Z success, right? And they brought attention to this successful outcome. Where the other group of parents said to their children, look at the effort. I'm so proud of the effort that you put into this. I'm so proud that you continue to try hard things, or whatever it was. So it was outcome based and effort based. And the effort based kids succeeded exponentially more than the kids who were praised for a successful outcome, right? So as parents, can we harness that, leverage that in our benefit, and point out the times like, hey, I really saw what you were trying to do there. That was so brave. Or, you know what? I loved the way you responded to that mistake in a game. That was so resilient. And I'm really, really proud of you. So can we, obviously we're going to praise them for great saves. That's great. Like you were working really hard on that and you were able to accomplish it. But also, can we point out the moments that maybe necessarily wouldn't be deemed a successful outcome, but it's a refinement or a reveal of their character, and make sure we bring attention back to that. Because again, I say this, I feel like on every podcast we talk about like session design, whatever you bring attention to is what you deem important. And at the foundation of every goalkeeper we believe is important is good character.
That'll preach.
Should we just end the podcast? I feel like we hit every audience member there, the coaches, the players, the parents. We should probably just do a whole podcast on that.
We could.
Yeah.
Certainly could. All right. Number 2, Jill. Something we love at TKI. Be more preventative. Can we take steps to help us be more preventative and just deny opportunities because of that action? And I think, we touched a lot on bravery. We've touched a lot on, being willing to make mistakes. And I think that this area of the game requires those same things.
Yeah, I think there's 4 ways that we can be more preventative. One is in our preventative positioning, and that's staying a bit higher off our line in a sprinter stance and making sure we have the mentality, that anticipatory mentality of, if the ball is within reach, I could go and solve this problem, right? So we want to make sure that we're in a position that maybe just our positioning vertically will deter the opponent from playing a ball in a central position behind our center backs, which is really dangerous, right? Maybe we deter that ball, or we force them or nudge them to play into the wider channel, which is less threatening for us. So number 1 is our preventative positioning. Number 2 is our variety in final actions, especially when it comes to outside the box, right? So I have the ability to emergency slide tackle. I have the ability to play one-time clearance. I can head the ball. I can chest the ball. I can touch pass pressure. Even Katie, like emergency spread outside the box without her hands, which was, an incredibly inventive solve. And when it comes to inside the box, if I'm trying to be more preventative, I want to have the tools to be able to manage traffic and navigate traffic, and have the ability to punch with either hand or both hands, and having some experience with that, right? The third way that we can prevent shots and high quality opportunities is to communicate with our team, to stay organized, to limit the opponent's opportunities. And the last way is to keep possession. If our team has the ball, the opponent can't score. So maybe it would be great for players right now to just do a quick audit of like, where do you feel comfortable? Are you vertically high and staying connected to the back line? Do you feel comfortable with a variety of different final actions outside the box? Do you feel good about your communication? And if you don't, that's okay, because communication is actually probably one of the more difficult aspects of goalkeeping, because it all relies on your game understanding, which is something that is hard to develop in some environments. And then the last one is the ability to retain possession. So do a quick audit. Where do you want to take some space? Where do you want to be deliberate this week? Ask more questions, seek out some more answers, reach out to us, ask us questions about it, and just gain some more insight so that you can be deliberate about what you're focusing on in your training.
I think being preventative is one of those things that, obviously we talk a lot about. I think if you had to ask anyone who follows TKI, they'd be like, oh yeah, they're obsessed with shot prevention, but it's so much more than what you generally think of. It's not just spread and smother, right? It's all those things you listed that can ultimately just keep favor in our hands. It can help us keep possession. It can deter opponents. It can help us communicate, right? So it's just kind of that thing that has so many umbrellas under it that I think it can be an area of like great growth for goalkeepers when they start to kind of take audit of where they need more support and working on that list of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I, in my head, would much rather prevent a shot than have to stop a shot. And I think
100%.
we get the praise and the accolades and we get lauded, for our shot stopping abilities. But if I want to be effective and successful, then I really want to not even allow those opportunities to happen as much as I possibly can.
I actually have a hot take, but I'm going to save it because that's my question at the end.
Okay, cool.
So you kind of talked about communication in here. You talked about game understanding a little bit. And I think that leads us really perfectly into point number 3 that can help you become a well-rounded goalkeeper or build into a more well-rounded goalkeeper, which is game understanding. Talked a lot about that in our podcast that we did a couple weeks ago. So again, check that out if you haven't. Highly recommend that you listen to that on the Union app. But let's talk a little bit about game understanding. What does that look like from the goalkeeper's perspective, and how do they develop that, even from a young, or maybe they're like 10 years into their journey?
That's a really good question. I think this is something that we can start as coaches. Let's start with the coaches, right? I think this is something that we can start at a much younger age than we think, right? I think when coaches get beginner goalkeepers, they think, okay, we're just going to work on the technical skills and we'll worry about the, tactics at a later time when they can, quote, understand them. But I think day one goalkeepers can understand tactics. So let's mesh them together. Let's do, solving pressure and set shape and diving and also athletic development and enjoyment and talk about character. We could do that all in one exercise. And basically wherever our feedback is or how we manipulate the session will bring some awareness into whatever you think is the most important part. But train the goalkeeper within the goal so they understand positioning, so they start to understand angles. Train them with live shots instead of doing volleys for kids who have, size 4 gloves and shrimp forks as hands, who shouldn't be worried about catching anyway, right? So shoot the ball from the floor. Stop volleying it to 8-year-olds who day one goalkeeping, right? I think there's a plethora of ways that as coaches we can inject game understanding in without necessarily getting out our tactics board and talking about it into our session design. For players, I would say, let's just start out with what formation does your team play, or what kind of capabilities do your teammates have around you, and how can you circumvent, worst case scenarios before they happen. So if you have a very attack-minded fullback who doesn't like to defend, okay, great. How can we circumvent problems in transition? I need to be really aware of where their speedy players are and the width of my center backs and how much space we're taking up across the field, right? Or what's the opponent doing? Are they pressing? Are they sitting off? Do they have a 2 front? Do they have a 3 front? Just some basic questions like that you could ask your coach, you could ask your teammates. Those are some things that I think I would start with. And then what I would do is I would watch the NWSL or MLS or Premier League or whatever league you like, and look for specific things. Where does the goalkeeper position when the ball is in the attacking third, right? If you're able to see a game live, that would be something I would want to know. What is the distance between the back line and the goalkeeper when the ball's in the attacking third? Or what is the goalkeeper's body shape when the ball's in the attacking third? Are they in a sprinter stance? Are they just standing there in one place? What is the goalkeeper's focus on right now, even when the ball's not in and around them? Or how is the goalkeeper solving pressure, right? Are they just hitting it long? Are they taking a touch into space? I would enter a game with one specific thing on my mind and look for that one or two things, right? Here's my one thing in possession. Here's my one thing out of possession. And I'm going to look at, goalkeepers over the course of a few games that weekend and see how I can take what they're doing and either add it to my game or just think about, vertical positioning. maybe Jane Campbell's vertical positioning is 6 yards off her line. I'm not going to adopt that to my game, but it's going to get me to think about, well, would I be that high? Or what's the optimal vertical positioning for me, being 5'5", which is different than Jane Campbell. And I'm going to play around with that this week at training.
Snaps to that. Action items, right? So you can, in your session, look and ask questions that help you with game understanding. You can watch the game. You can ask questions to coaches. You can start to explore your own positioning based on what you're seeing. I think those action items are a few things that help you understand the game better. And when we understand the game better, it helps us, one, have a catalog to make our decisions from. I also think it just makes us more comfortable in the communication aspect that you talked about in our how to be more preventative phase of this conversation.
Yeah. I think if we broke down this podcast and we were talking about solving pressure, being more preventative, and understanding the game more, those would be like the outcomes, but like the process would be, solving pressure, being more brave. The process of being more preventative is bring some self-awareness to where I can improve. Yeah. And the third one, understanding the game more, probably would be like asking more questions of others, right? So again, if we just focus on the outcome, we might not arrive there every single time. We maybe focus on some of those little process things. We feel like we can progress more, right? And we talked about this, I think it was in our last podcast, where people aren't necessarily motivated and satisfied by just the outcome, but the process, the progress is what's actually super fulfilling. And if we can focus on being brave, being a little bit more self-aware, and being curious, those are three things that are inside of my control on a consistent basis, that eventually, in a long-term way, I am going to get better at solving pressure, being more preventative, and understanding the game.
It's good. So good. I had to write it down. Obviously, I always got my notebook handy right here. It's a lot of things in here. This has been great. I think it's awesome. I think we leave it right here, right now, and there's always room for you to reach us to give you more of what you need. We say it every podcast, but we are here to support you. We do this because we love it. We do this because we want to help people. If you're looking for, more action items, how you can do these three things, or you just have questions about goalkeeping, or there's something specifically you'd like to hear or see us talk about, please reach out. Instagram, Twitter, our emails are on the website. We're here for you, and we want to support you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we've really started to uptick on the post on our social media, like on Instagram, about our podcast, because I mean, you're always dropping truth bombs and stuff, but if you guys like it, we want to hear from you. And we've been hearing from more and more people. We got the air horn button. We've got some people posting about it on social media, which just brings us so much joy. It's so nice to hear that you guys are really enjoying the podcast and that you're using it. If you have a success story, you want to hear about it, or a question, just go on our Instagram, on social media, and leave a comment, and we will make sure that we give you guys a shout out, because we need to celebrate the small wins inside these walls of TKI and outside the walls of TKI. I want to celebrate you and your commitment to making yourself a better person and goalkeeper. So please share with us how that's been going for you.
Darn tootin'. That's my new
What's
phrase.
your question? I'm so intrigued.
I want to know your goalkeeping hot take.
Golly.
If you need me to go first, I can.
My immediate thought process goes to, I think we should rewire our thinking from, technical to effective.
Ooh,
and
spicy.
I put something on Instagram the other day, and we talked about in our coaches course, and I asked you guys, please describe the best goalkeepers in your minds in 1 to 3 adjectives. And it was really enlightening. It was like resilient, brave, badass, commanding, hard to beat, like all these adjectives that had nothing to do with technique. And then I reflected, and I was like, okay, if we're saying that the best goalkeepers in the world, these are the attributes that we admire the most, why does our entire session design revolve around one element of the game that nobody even values as the highest priority? So that would be my hot take, probably. Yeah.
Head scratch.
Yeah. Is that the emoji, like them?
Exactly.
With the eyeball?
Thank you. Yes, I'm so glad you just get me.
Yeah.
We're best friends.
That's why you're my best friend, my boss, and my mentor.
I am not your boss. Don't use that. You have to change it to your best friend, your employee,
colleague.
and
Yeah.
your MP. All right.
What's yours?
I have two. I'm going to go with this one. Goalkeepers don't need shin guards.
Okay, that's a good one.
We don't need them. Like, we shouldn't need them in practice. We shouldn't need them in a game. Because what is it? It's for safety. Okay, I'm way more likely to get hit in the face, the chest, the gut, stepped on than my shins. I've been hit nearly everywhere but my shins.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good
one. That's my hot take. I feel passionate about it.
You said you have two? Because I have one more that I would like to share as well.
Okay, yeah, go. I do have another one.
Okay. You guys ready for this one? Size isn't everything. I think we should stop prioritizing height and start prioritizing mobility, agility, and nimbleness.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
My 5'3" self thank you.
And I say that because, listen, we've talked about this before where we're saying, the best house on the block is subjective, right? The best house for me might be different than the best house for you. And let's just say that my grandparents got a 3-story house, but they can't climb upstairs. What is the 3-story house doing for them? It doesn't mean it's a better house because it's taller, right? If they can't use it, it doesn't matter if someone is 6'2", if they're slow and not agile, right? So what's to say a 5'8" or whatever goalkeeper couldn't be as good as someone who's 6'2"? I just think we need to change our minds about that.
That's brilliant. All right, mine. I feel like maybe I've gone on this rant before. It's a TED Talk of mine. I think that preventative actions need a stat category, and stats aren't everything, but why are just saves the only thing that goalkeepers get credit for?
Yep. Goalkeeper stats are terrible. It doesn't tell you anything. There's so many gaps in that, and there's really no proxy to passing percentage. Like what am I what's that telling me?
Yeah.
Nothing.
I don't care if your pass completion was 100% if you found the same center back every single time.
Right.
It doesn't tell me anything about what your ability to solve pressure is.
It tells me nothing.
And crosses, arguably, coming out for 1v1s, preventative measures, and crosses are two of the most complex areas of the game. And they mean nothing to the soccer world.
I totally agree. Maybe you really sparked something in me that whenever I'm on an NWSL broadcast, instead of, when they pop up the stats for a goalkeeper, that maybe I give them some more stats like percentage of crosses stopped or number of final actions outside the box. I think that could be good. Really prompted me to think about that and just educate the Gen Pop about some goalkeeping stats.
Let's do it. Let's change the world, Jill.
Let's do it. Yeah. You and everybody listening to this podcast, we're all in it together.
We are. We're going to do a flash mob one day.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, that's all I got. I'm going to end it with that. But guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you later.
Catch you later.